Welcome to the STARR Coalition podcast. This is Luke Kramer, Executive Director of the STARR Coalition. We come together every now and then and meet with movers and shakers and people that have experience with mental health issues and with suicide prevention or substance use or other topics that we feel would benefit those of you who tune in. And so today we're excited to have with us Marquitta Magnini. Marquitta has You've had a lot of, you've worked for a long time at the Pine Bluff Arsenal, right? And so you've worked kind of in that military setting for a while. But nowadays you spend a lot of time volunteering and helping with NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness, through family-to-family groups. You talked that today you've been doing crisis intervention training to help with police officers, which is a vital piece, I think. Unfortunately, a lot of people that are diagnosed with a mental illness at some point are touched by the criminal justice system. And like I always like to say that the police officers are sometimes the first person on the treatment team, right? I mean, they are the first person on the treatment team. Exactly. And so whatever happens at that moment can really dictate everything that happens afterwards for that individual. So I appreciate what you're doing for the crisis intervention training. So years ago, your son was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And
schizoaffective disorder.
Okay, schizoaffective disorder. And it has probably set you on a path that you didn't think that you were going to even be a part of at some point in your life. I mean, what kind of tell us about at that moment and what happened and how did that change your life?
Well, Luke, I'm going to say, when you say I wasn't on that path, you're right, because I say this a lot. I'm not a therapist or a doctor or anything, attorney, but I have 63 years almost of experience with mental illness because my dad went undiagnosed for many years. And so therefore, no, didn't know about mental illness, didn't know it really ran in my family. He just was taken off to Fort Roots and brought back home, and he was very abusive to us. But looking back now in my education that I have through NAMI, it was a mental illness that gone undiagnosed. So no, I had no idea that when my son took ill, that it was a mental illness. He was a teenager, drug usage, we'll just get his little bootstraps and
right.
get on the right road. And,
right.
So mental illness was far from my thoughts, and that's even what was wrong with him. So no, I never thought I would be on this path. But once we took him to a drug rehab, they told us to come pick him up. That it was not drugs. And so about the third one of them mentioned, said, I think he might have bipolar. Bipolar? What is that? I don't know anything about that. And so I started doing some research and talking to a doctor and found out that she told me one of the things he would do would be jump out of a car. And that's how I finally first got him to a hospital, was when he jumped out of a car in Little Rock. And they took him to Baptist Hospital. And that's when a doctor told me he has 3 things going on. One, he has a kidney stone, and he has drug usage, substance abuse, and he probably has a mental illness. Just don't know what kind. We need further testing. Mm-hmm. Said I don't know which one came first, but it really doesn't matter. But what we want to treat first is the mental. So we went from there to that's where we started our path. Right there, and I just knew what I had gone through with my father, and still looking back, and even today, I would say yesterday in CIT training, there was a presentation given on autism. Mm-hmm. At one of the times where he tried to go to school in Fayetteville, the doctor there said, "Have you ever thought that he might have autism or Asperger's?" And I said, "No, that's never been discussed." I took him to the doctor his entire life because there was something, just didn't know what it was. He cried, just bad days, didn't understand what was going on. The doctors talked to me then, but never said anything about mental illness. They just treated his physical symptoms. His blood count was low, so they gave him iron. But after hearing that autism presentation yesterday, I'm really not so sure that that was the beginning of some form of autism, because it was the problems we were having was in school about the fire drill bell going off, the vacuum cleaner, the toilet flushing. If the teacher wasn't there, it was a substitute. All those times they would call me and I would have to go get him. Or if they were having a fire drill, it was planned. They would call me and I would go before. I would be there when it happened so that I could hold on to him and hug him, because he just couldn't stand the sounds. And so, it's one of those things that education, as you go through this journey, you think, well, I already know this part, or, So now looking back, which you can't do that so much, but as education has, we found out more and more, even just in the recent, I'd say 2 months, I also found out that the PANS and PANDAS that we hear about now, that was part of a microplasmic pneumonia, which he had when he was 8 months old.
Wow.
So I'm still learning and still trying to find out this journey of trying to help him. But yeah, you're right. I guess you would do anything for your children.
Sure.
And at the point I started that journey, I was, as we've talked before, felt like I was so very alone. That I was just out here by myself fighting a battle that I had no idea how to fight. As you mentioned, I worked for the government, federal government, U.S. military. I knew how to do tornado plans and, battle update briefs and chemical accident plans and all that, and I knew exactly how to follow those plans and even how to write them sometimes. But I didn't have a plan for my son, and there was not a plan that I could try to retrieve and find out how to go down that journey. I've kind of kidded now. There wasn't a Siri, there wasn't a Google,
right.
There wasn't anything
right.
to call. However, I reached out, and I'm not really sure. I think it was one of the hospitals got me in contact with National Alliance on Mental Illness, and so all my family and friends would call me, but still I just felt so alone. And so when I got into NAMI and found that all these other people were there and were going down this same journey like I was, and we didn't really have some of the answers that we wanted, but at least they understood and they were with me and they had empathy and they could say, oh yeah, my son did this, or oh, my daughter did this. And then also as a parent and as a mom, you start with, did I do enough when he was young? Did I ask the right questions? What if I had done this? So in NAMI, we teach how to care for ourselves. And one of the sayings we have, you can't know what no one has told you. So I really bank on that because I didn't know those things back then. However, during one of those times that he and I were at the mall, and he was pretty ill at the time, but we had gotten out, and his physician, his pediatric doctor, was there. And as we walked out, my son held the door for him, and he said, oh, thank you. And he didn't recognize him. And the doctor didn't recognize my son. My son recognized him, and he looked at him, and he said, you knew I was sick, and you did nothing. So he must have known himself that things were different.
How old was he at that point when he may have been aware?
If I were, at the time he said that, he was about probably 17 or 18.
Right.
I feel like he knew when he was 14 and 15.
Wow.
Because he came to me when he was about 16 and said that he was crying a lot, just like he had done as a young boy when I'd taken him to the doctor. And he said, Mom, I'm just not like the other kids. So looking back, I probably think he knew probably when he was about 14, really starting to wonder what was going on. And, those are those hormonal times. You're starting junior high school. He was really involved in sports. He did always really well at that. But I would say when he was 16, then he really knew something was different, But he didn't know how to explain it to me. He didn't know how to tell me, I didn't, still at that point in time, didn't know about mental illness. The physician had not mentioned it to me as a possibility. knowing that my father probably had undiagnosed mental illness, I should have maybe been suspicious of it, but we didn't talk about it.
Right.
Until my son became ill, did my mom say, well, your dad has schizophrenia? No,
really? Wow.
Why didn't you tell me, Mom?
Wow.
So,
so the discussion, obviously, just the ability to even have a discussion about it has changed a lot over the years. So your father, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and you did not know until your son was how old? I mean, this is a conversation, obviously.
Say, probably, 2001.
So it took decades and decades.
In 1986, my father tried to commit suicide in front of myself and my two children. And he was 76 years old at that time.
Oh, my goodness.
So that's why I always tell people I have 63 years experience of mental illness, because I was born into a family with it, but we just didn't talk about it.
And really not even knowing until your son needed help, that this was even a part of your life, that there was some diagnosis. You knew obviously something was not the same, but it was not. It was nothing that you knew anything about. And I know your son, and he is a good-looking dude.
He is.
I mean, if it's one of those things that there's the face of mental illness there is no definition of what someone looks like or what someone has accomplished or what someone is capable of, that it is and can be a part of anyone's life. And so the idea that looking back now and seeing that maybe there were some signs that were possibly there, but not even knowing to even have that inner monologue of at that time that, hey, this is what's possibly going on. When you share your story like this, you do realize that you are bringing awareness to people that could possibly have them at a very early stage being able to define what may be happening to their own children.
Luke, I hope and pray that. I really do, because he went on to high school and graduated and went through college, or tried to go through college 3 times, and has been unsuccessful each time. He's become ill each time. And so at this point in 2001, and I had no idea, in fact, the morning of, my faith plays a great role in the care for my son. And I had prayed really hard that morning that God would tell me where to go and how to help or what to do. And that morning I gave him to the good Lord and said, I will never take him back. And so the good Lord has just taken care of him. And that's how I found out about him and where he was at, because I had no idea where he was even at. He wasn't home, he wouldn't come home. It's the morning that he jumped out of the car, And so I made a promise to him and to myself that as long as I live, I will always fight a war, a battle against mental illness, not against my son, not ever against my son,
wow.
but against the mental illness, and that as long as the opportunities are presented, I will be there talking to someone. I mean, think about it, Luke. I drove in the snow to come see you today to be able to share a story.
Yes.
Not many people I drive in the snow to see.
Right. And you have a lot of things going on in your life. I mean, to stop and say, I this is important enough for me to be able to talk to other people about.
Right. Yeah. It is. And like the law enforcement officers, explaining to them that sometimes when you encounter that person, let's just say for my son, and because he has been ill recently and he is still not well, and I'm very concerned and very worried about him, till almost called to do a welfare check last night on him, because I couldn't get a hold of him, which is very unlike him not to answer the phone. And so with all that going on, I'm just bound and determined to still share that story with the law enforcement officers. That's what I was trying to do, where I was headed with that, was that, right now where he's at, he might just get up and walk in the neighborhood in the rain, and that somebody might say, he's been in the rain for 2 or 3 days now, because that's kind of what happened to him last time. And they might call the police, and he might become a little bit afraid because he's never had any interaction with the law, and he's not, he's a very sweet, kind, good-looking young guy. And so, the law might scare him a little bit, but in the CIT training, he's one of those that you could say, hey, what's going on? Are you, do you need me to call some of your family? Looks like you've been wandering in the rain. The law enforcement officer, from what they're trained, might see a few little bit of those mental illness symptoms to just enough to question, and they might can just ask a very simple question. It looks like to me I probably need to call a family member. Do you have someone that I could call? And my son would say, yeah, if I've been walking in the rain, you might need to call my mother because something's wrong. So sometimes it can be just as simple as that for the law enforcement officer, but he didn't know that before. Maybe they didn't know how to approach him using short sentences, some calming, not overpower them, be aware of the lights on their police car, maybe turn them where they're not looking at them. So just a lot of little bitty things, just really small things. It's, as I've said to law enforcement officers, my son-in-law is a state police CID, so I thank them for what they do. I thank them for coming to the class because I have a son-in-law that I want to make sure gets home to my grandchildren and to my daughter. So, I don't want anyone to jeopardize what they've been taught as a law enforcement officer. But with mental illness, there are things that they can be taught through CIT that will help them do their job just as well and bring my son home back to me or to the hospital, wherever he needs to go. And other people have loved ones just as much. Not just my son. I speak on behalf of all the families out there, or I hope I do, because I think all of us sometimes get just so tired.
Sure.
We don't always know the answers, and we just have to try a lot of different things sometimes. That's where I teach the family to family class, like you talked about, of being able to try to take care of ourselves and not feel so alone. Just had a graduating class last night of 22 or 23 people. And so
wow.
I tease them often that when they first come in at the first class, they're very somber, they're very upset, and they're very quiet. And by the end of the last, I'd say 4 or 5 classes, I'm having to get a cowbell just to get their attention.
How empowering that must feel, though.
Yes.
The thing I love about you, Marquitta, is this relentless drive to continue a conversation that a lot of people just simply either don't want to have or don't know how to have. And your ability to say, I will stand up in front of 10,000 people, or I'll talk in front of a microphone in a small room, that I will do whatever I can, that my voice will carry and resonate. How does that feel to family members, have you seen, once you empower them to be able to start a conversation? Now, caregivers are probably the most underrated individuals in the world, right? I mean, caregiving can take every bit of your energy, but there must be it must feel empowering for people to be able to show them they're not alone and let them start talking about these things.
There's two things, two answers, I guess, to your questions. One, it is very tiring, so that's why we need to take care of ourselves, because when I first started with my son, I too became depressed and had to go to the doctor and get on medication myself because of trying to take care of him. The emotions of trying to take care of a son, whether he's 6 years old or whether he's 18 years old or whether he's 36 years old, is very emotional. So I have to make sure I take care of myself, and so we teach that in the class. But here's where I'm at right now in the family-to-family class. I have tried really hard as I talk to mothers, because most people that came were females or mothers who came. A few spouses, and I say they must have the jewels beyond jewels.
Yeah, right.
Okay, to still live with someone who has a mental illness and take care of them and love them. They are my number one people that I love to be able to hear from, because that's such a wonderful love to love someone like that.
Sure.
But mothers were coming, and so now that I talk to mothers more and more, I encourage them to bring their husbands, their spouses, because it gives you a day off. I kind of tried to talk a lot of different ways, but I found that worked, and to say, if you bring your spouse with you, he can learn the same things that you learn. And so when days are hard for you, you can just say, hey, you know what? It's the father's role today. I'm taking a day off and I'm going shopping. And so you can leave that loved one with the father who is trained as well as you are or better. Now, sometimes I have to defend myself and not be a marriage counselor because I can say something and the father will say, see, I told you that's how we needed to do it. So I have to back up and say, oh, no, I'm not a marriage counselor. Yeah. But here was one of the most rewarding pictures, if you can just even think about this. Here I finally have, I think it was last year, fathers coming to the class, many fathers coming. A young father on one side of the table and an older father on the other one, who had been coming to my support group, who I finally convinced that he needed the family class, and sharing with him what it would help, how it would help him. The young father said, I just don't know what to do. I'm just giving up. This is a new thing for me. I don't know where to go. And the older father reached across the aisle with his hand and said, look, we can do this together.
Wow.
We can do this. I promise you, we can get there. And so to see that was something I had longed for a very long time. That older father has just recently let me know that he has had a first vacation in probably 10 years that he took both boys on. It was the best thing in his life. Last night, I got ready to leave. There was an older gentleman there who could barely hear, and so sometimes he'd tell me, I don't know what you're saying, but I made sure he got real close to me and I spoke louder. He got up after the class, very quiet most of the time, but we had separated them in one of the classes, all the fathers together and all the mothers together. First time we had done it like that. Those fathers who were so quiet, when we had them to do the exercise, oh my goodness, their voices became so loud and empowered, and felt like they were learning how to do something, because for a father, they're a fix-it. I can fix this.
Right.
This is my family. I can fix it. Mothers, we have the emotion, and we grieve, That gentleman, as he left out the door last night, a very much older man, grabbed me and hugged me and gave me the biggest old kiss on the cheek and said, I just love you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you so much, So if there's one father out of that class, and I know there were more, and there was one father out of the previous classes, and now these fathers are not only fathers, but they're spouses too, and allowed to get those families back together, whether it may just be the husband and wife, we've done something, and that's the rewarding part. And it's not what Marquitta does. It's the material that NAMI has written, Dr. Joyce Berlin wrote, and has now, been edited and through revisions, that we teach that. But we also teach through experience. I share a lot of my experiences. This is the one thing I'll say. I have received a lot of awards through the U.S. military, one from Governor Rick Perry for the Yellow Rose of Texas for taking care of soldiers, from a 4-star general. But there is no reward better than the award I got from being a NAMI mommy, is what I call it.
NAMI mommy.
That's what I call it. That's the best award that I've ever gotten.
Yeah.
And that's just seeing people that when they come in at first class and they're upset and crying, and they leave happy and joking and made new friends. Some of them were telling me last night they had gone to the show together. They're planning to go out to eat as a family together, So when you see that, how can you not? How can you not just stand and share? Because you're making a difference, with the material that NAMI has given you the opportunity to present. I consider it an honor.
But in most people would find so much peace in knowing that they are not alone. Growing up, I'm sure that your mother probably didn't talk about your father's schizophrenia to anyone.
Nope, she did not.
And, we are now slowly opening up as a society that we feel comfortable talking about issues that affect our loved ones or us personally when it comes to mental illness. Seeing that transformation must have been something great for you to see. And what a beautiful thing for family members for the very first time to be able to open up and recognize that they're not alone. What advice would you give to maybe family members that are out there that may have a loved one that is showing symptoms of something that's not quite right, but either they're wanting to just ignore it, or that their children may have, or parents may have a mental illness, and they don't know how to begin that conversation, or where do you even go? What are the first words that you begin to say to people?
Well, I want to go back a little bit because you said something about things that they share. One of the mothers in this family class told us in the class that she shared in the group that she went with the mothers something that she had never shared with anyone ever her entire life with her son and his mental illness. And it was some things that were very difficult to share. But because she was with mothers who were experiencing that, it was easy for her to share. Mm-hmm. So, my advice would be, don't feel like you're alone, and that you can seek help. And for me, it was to call NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, to attend a support group. That's where one of the young men there at the support group, at the time I was going to have to get guardianship or do something for my son, some sort of form of commitment. And at the support group, he said, if you can sit here and I said, I just don't know if I can do that. And he said, if you can stand there and do nothing, then make sure that when he ends up in jail and they medicate him and he becomes better, that you can answer the question, you knew there was something wrong, why didn't you do something? And I couldn't answer that question, so that's why I went forward with what I did. But NAMI, there's lots of different places. I guess for me, NAMI starts it all because we can give you resources. The family-to-family class is for those who have loved ones that are 16 or older, 18 and older. There's a class called NAMI Basics for someone who has children. Talk to your school counselors. There are so many more things in place now that we didn't have back then. Talk to your pediatrician, and don't stop there. Ask for a referral to a psychiatrist. We have so many more. We don't have enough. We're very short on that, but we do have some. Don't let it go unnoticed, and be persistent. I share that in one of the classes. We try to empower you to be able to go to the doctors. And, for someone who has an adult son or someone over the age of 18, well, I can't talk to them. They won't do anything, because of the HIPAA. Oh, well, that's true. But for me, I journaled a lot. I would write, okay, on March 18th, he did this. On March 19th, he did this. And so I could hand that to the doctor, or I could email it to the doctor, or I could fax it to the doctor. He didn't have to talk to me, but I gave him enough information that when he talked to my son and looked at it, he might see rapid cycling. He might say he was depressed for these weeks, and that's all that I saw, So he took, because if you think about the doctor's very short, 15 to 30 minutes max.
3 minutes sometimes.
Yeah. And so they don't see them,
Sure.
Enough to know. So write those things down and send them to the doctor. Send them registered, however you feel comfortable. Because here's what I felt. When there were times when I didn't know what to do or how to handle something, just doing that made me feel better. When I was reaching out to a doctor or to a nurse or to a school counselor or to anyone to just be able to say, these are symptoms I'm seeing, I think if we continue to talk about mental illness, when I tell the law enforcement officers, a lot of times when I leave with my speech, I'm like, okay, now go home. You might have talked about the guy you arrested today and the one that had the heart attack and the one you had, you go home around the dinner table tonight and talk about mental illness,
Wow.
So that it becomes a household word, So the advice is families is you're not alone. NAMI is right here with you as well, I'm sure, as some other organizations, but that's the one I'm most familiar with. There are school counselors. If they're not, we'll help you find them. Don't give up hope. Treatment does work. For my son, for a doctor who told us that he would never be any better than what he was and standing on a street corner, he's been much better. He's held a job. He's stayed on his medication up until recently. And so for 10 years, we were good. So those are things. Never give up hope. Treatment does work. And reach out. And if it takes even going to the governor's office, sometimes you have to do that.
I think that parents need to know that sometimes, I wouldn't even say extreme measures, but some measures need to be taken. Again, I am so happy that we've been able to sit down and talk, and I thank you for the voice that you're giving, not only for your son, but for other family members and other people in our community. You know, you talk about NAMI a lot. National Alliance for Mental Illness is an incredible organization. And for those of you who don't know about NAMI, it's a national network of advocates. They have a chapter in every state. Then they sometimes have affiliates within those states. But Arkansas, we focus a lot around NAMI Arkansas.
But we have affiliates now.
Yes, and so those affiliates.
Hot Springs, we've signed it, and Little Rock has been signed.
Fantastic.
And Searcy.
So what we're going to do is continue to grow NAMI in this state, and it's growing nationally. And you can go to NAMI.org to find out more. And I think here it's NAMIAR.org to find out more about Arkansas. But know that you're not alone. Know that there are others who share some of the same struggles and triumphs that you do. But we have to continue the conversation. We can no longer allow this to be a conversation that we just push further and further away. That mental illness affects a lot of people, and it's okay. We're going to work together through these things.
It doesn't define who you are.
All right. Well, thank you, Marquitta. So we've been listening to Marquitta Magnini. She is I guess you're retired at this point, right? Right, retired and working full time. Exactly.
I get to do what I want to do now.
Exactly right, and that's the difference. But working to teach crisis intervention training to law enforcement, working for family-to-family groups, working with NAMI, and then sitting down with people like me, speaking at the Capitol, using your voice to help ensure that other people know that they are not alone.
We have family support groups, throughout the state of Arkansas. I recently trained a group, and we have two now. We had 0 in Little Rock, and now we have 2.
Good. And for those who've been to the groups, and I've talked to those who have, they say it is a liberating place to be. Yeah. So thank you for all the work you've been doing. So you've been listening to the STARR Coalition podcast. You can visit us at www.thestarr.org for more podcasts. And thank you again, Marquitta, for being here. And thank you guys for joining and listening in. Thanks.